It's not so much that I don't have any jokes to make, more that I don't really want to make any. I'm out of the sport anime trash pit! I'm still in the anime trash pit, but we're out of sport anime. So what happened recently was that I had kind of run out of really super bingeable sport anime, so I was like, I want to watch something else. And so I have a subscription to Funimation streaming service, and so I was just kind of filtering through their shows and literally just putting tons of random things into my queue, and decided for no good reason to watch this show. I didn't know anything about it. It had not been recommended to me. I knew nothing about this show, and I started it. Now, when I started this show, I honestly thought it was going to be something kind of funny and light. The basic premise is that our main character, Auditor, is a 27-year-old unemployed man. He does seem to work odd jobs, such as one at a convenience store, but he hasn't held down a steady job since one that he held for 3 months right out of college. We're not initially aware of the reasons why he quit that job after 3 months, but we know that he hasn't held a steady one since, and he's had many unsuccessful interviews. He pretends to his good friends that he has a job, and that he's financially supported predominantly by his parents. We pick up with Auditor the moment that his mother calls and says she's no longer going to be helping him along, and so he's, to put it kindly, totally fucked. It is then that he meets a strange young man who offers him the chance to be part of a 1-year experiment, during which time the company who runs the experiment will pay for all of his expenses. All he has to do is take a pill. Yeah, I know, it kind of makes you think of The Matrix, but it's not The Matrix. Instead, what happens is that Naruto wakes up looking like a 17-year-old kid, and he's told that he's going to be spending 1 year in a 3rd-year high school class. Again, going into this show, I thought it was really just going to be a comedy. We might get some high school problems. If you've watched any slice of life high school anime, I think you kind of know what I'm getting at, but if you don't, we're assuming romantic entanglements, just general light and fluffy things, nothing too deep. If there are any angsty backstories, you'll kind of go, it's anime. There's always angsty backstories. And for the most part, this show really does start out that way. The primary, as I call them, high school problems are really related to one particular character named Reina, except that her problems aren't ones that I think are easily laughed at. Her primary issue is that she's clearly a high-intensity type A personality, and therefore puts a lot of pressure on herself to succeed. She works incredibly hard, and yet she's always beaten in academics by Chizuru, and she's always beaten in athletics by Honoka. This is difficult for Reina because as she fails in both of these areas where she works so incredibly hard, she tends to put the failure onto herself, and therefore creating a vicious cycle of self-doubt, depression, and feelings of worthlessness. Reina starts to spiral towards what could be something potentially self-destructive. In fact, it's when Auditor catches her stealing Chizuru's bag, they fall and nearly hurt themselves, and at which point Reina actually talks to Chizuru and they sort themselves out, that you see her start to go down a better path. Now, I'm not really a type A personality. I know some people who are. I'm just kind of like a mid-range personality, but I know that feeling of failure and blaming oneself. This for me comes in various things. My personal trainer has always teased me because I'm the type of person where if I don't get something perfect the first time, I'm incredibly frustrated with myself. Like, I get really angry at myself going, why can't I do this thing and get it right immediately? And I could be trying something incredibly complicated that like nobody gets right the first time. I don't care. I expect myself to get it right the first time for some inexplicable reason. And I'm going through that right now, going back into figure skating where it's like my brain knows how to do things, but it's getting my body to catch up and really be in a place where it's physically able to catch up. That is the most frustrating thing going through right now. So I guess you could say I empathize with Reina a little bit there. But I really want to talk about Auditor. The primary angsty backstory, as I always tease, because let's be real, anime always has an angsty backstory for everyone, is related to Auditor. And it's one that I honestly can't make fun of. While ReLIFE started out as quite humorous and, just genuinely hilarious, I was kind of holding back so many giggles. It very quickly started to get very serious on topics such as bullying and really its major parallels to workplace harassment. Admittedly, I'm going to briefly go into a little spoilers here because I just feel the need to talk about this bit of the show, and this is stuff you don't learn until fairly late in the show. Auditor had to deal with the fact that his sensei, as it were, his tutor, who was at this first company where he held his first job, the one that only lasted 3 months, how she was very brutally harassed by the other men who were there. I appreciate that it's not sexual harassment, but it is certainly sexist harassment. In fact, Arata's sensei makes a point of saying part of this is the fact that I'm a woman and I'm beating them at this game. And while you can see that she initially is taking very much the high road by saying the fact that these male coworkers of mine are resorting to sabotage to potentially ruin my career, shows that they've given up on fighting fairly. There's a sense that after a while, she's doing her best to sort of grin and bear something that is really killing her on the inside. And while that speaks volumes not only of her and of that environment, I think it speaks volume of the boss for this company. And the saddest part is that Arata butts in and he gets himself involved. And shortly after he gets involved, the harassment intensifies and his sensei eventually commits suicide. And it is Arata who finds her after she has hanged herself in her office. The effect this has on Arata is really intense, and I obviously knew there was going to be an angsty backstory initially because Arata has these sort of moments of flashbacks, and what he does is he grips his neck because he's having a panic attack. This is something I have seen with a couple of my friends who've had panic attacks. They do this because to them it feels like they can't breathe. In his case, it is both a sense that he can't breathe, but it is also the trauma related to finding his sensei having hanged herself in her office. In fact, he makes a point of saying that when he tried to go on his first interviews after that incident, after he quit because he was so appalled, not only at what had happened to his sensei, but the reaction of the people at the office afterwards. He says that tying a necktie and tightening it used to throw him into a full-blown panic attack. Ultimately, he's selected by the organization that runs ReLIFE because of the fact that he'd become aimless in life and was running down a path of inevitable self-destruction from which he couldn't escape. And again, usually I tease about angsty backstories in anime. This is one I couldn't joke about, and I think it's because it's not treated in any way that is expletive, that is gratuitous. It's very real, it's very frank, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because this is stuff that we see happen, unfortunately, in our own world. This is not something that's new to people. I feel very fortunate that I have worked at places where I have never endured workplace harassment. Now, when I worked at Barnes & Noble, I've been harassed by customers, but never by colleagues, never by supervisors. And I cannot imagine what that must be like. And I like also that this show, by dealing with that, also dealt with survivor's guilt. And that is essentially what is plaguing Auditor for the entirety of this show. And it's what he needs to learn to work through and kind of deal with in a healthy way. It is essentially about overcoming trauma and being able to move on. So yeah, this show started out incredibly funny and happy, and then just started getting really real by the end, and yes, it brought out some happy, fluffy feels, but I was just sort of like, I can't get over how astonishingly good the discussion it brought in about workplace harassment, survivor's guilt, grief. How? This was not what I anticipated because I didn't know anything about this show going into it. Sorry there aren't really any jokes in this review, but this isn't a show I really felt I wanted to joke about, if only because it dealt with those topics. The first and currently only season of ReLIFE is quite short. It is 13 episodes, and while I would eagerly await a season 2 from what I gather, it's pretty much caught up to the manga series it's based on in one season. This distresses me because I think it does have a beautiful ending, but it's still very much an open ending because it only covered about half the school year. There's a back half to the school year, and I want it. Like, the ReLIFE experiment is not yet over. I need the back half of the school year. This is important to me. I watched this show in the English dub, and I thought it was quite strong. It's got a host of Funimation dub regulars, and they are absolutely fantastic per Funimation dubs, and I think they really brought out the personalities of the characters. I can't speak for the Japanese, but I will say I thought the English was fantastic. Really, for me, fit the tone of the show quite well. So I recommend it if you get the chance. If you want to watch it in Japanese, go watch it in Japanese. I just can't speak for it. But that's it for me today, you guys, so until next time.
Carried off like a rescued princess by a dude 10 years younger than me while everyone watches? Oh, just throw me away!
Cheers.